I stood in the backyard while my mother raised her glass and thanked everyone for coming. She thanked my sister's children. She thanked the neighbors. Then she thanked me for being understanding. People laughed softly. Someone clapped. I felt my daughter's fingers tighten around my hand. Behind us, the new pool shimmered blue, bright and loud. No one asked where the cello went. No one asked why Lucy wasn't smiling. I said nothing. I didn't move. I let the moment pass through me while every adult there chose comfort over fairness, and silence did the rest. That was the beginning. I learned early that authority does not always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like patience. It looks like people telling you to wait your turn while quietly deciding you are not worth one. My parents had always been careful with words. They didn't shout. They explained. They explained why things were easier this way, why it made sense, why I should understand. I was the older daughter. I was capable. I didn't need as much. That language followed me into adulthood like a shadow that learned how to speak. The cello lived at my parents' house for practical reasons. That was the story. My grandmother's music room was temperature controlled. It was safe. My apartment was small, walls thin, neighbors impatient. Everyone agreed it was better this way. When Lucy practiced there, my parents liked to say how lucky she was. They liked the sound of generosity when it belonged to them. I believed them, because believing them made life smoother. My mother handled schedules. My father handled money. Together they handled decisions without asking. When my grandmother moved into assisted living, they said it was temporary. They said she would rest. They said it was for her safety. No one asked her what safety felt like to her. No one asked Lucy what the cello meant beyond sound. Authority has a way of turning care into paperwork. The day I noticed the contractors, my mother smiled and said it was a surprise. She said surprises were good for morale. She said families needed shared spaces. She didn't say whose family. My father nodded like the math had already been done. I felt something shift, but I didn't push. Pushing had never ended well. Pushing turned you into the problem. When the cello disappeared, they spoke to me the same way they always had. Calm, reasonable, slightly tired, as if my question was an interruption, not a violation. My father said it was valuable and unused. My mother said Lucy would adapt. They said children were resilient. They said my sister's kids needed joy after a hard year. No one said Lucy needed anything at all. What cut deepest was not the sale. It was the expectation. They expected my compliance. They expected my silence. They expected me to explain it to my daughter in a way that made them look kind. Authority relies on witnesses who stay quiet. They had trained me well. I watched Lucy that night as she practiced on a borrowed instrument. She didn't cry. She adjusted. She always adjusted. I recognized that skill. It was the same one I learned when I was young. The ability to make yourself smaller so other people didn't have to feel guilty. My parents slept easily. They believed the matter was closed. In their world, decisions moved downward. Consequences did not move upward. They had lived that way for decades. I realized then that this was not just about a cello. It was about who was allowed to take and who was expected to understand why. I had mistaken their calm for fairness. It was simply confidence without accountability. They assumed proximity meant permission. They assumed love meant access. They assumed I would smooth the edges, as I always had, because conflict made them uncomfortable. That night, as Lucy packed away the borrowed cello, I understood authority in my family had never protected the vulnerable. It protected routines. It protected appearances. And it relied on one quiet person absorbing the cost so everyone else could feel reasonable. I had been that person for most of my life already. Looking back, I can trace the pattern without effort. It runs through birthdays, holidays, and quiet errands where decisions were already made before I arrived. I was the flexible one, the one who could adjust plans, budgets, and expectations. When something had to give, it was usually me. No one said it out loud. They didn't have to. The rhythm was familiar. My sister learned early that demand worked. She asked loudly. She framed her needs as urgent. Children need space. Children need enrichment. Children need joy. Somehow her children were always plural, while mine felt singular and optional. Lucy was easy, they said. Lucy was mature. Lucy understood. Those words followed her the way they once followed me. When I was young, my parents borrowed from my savings account to help my sister through a rough patch. They repaid some of it later. Not all. It was never discussed again. When I planned my wedding, my mother suggested a smaller venue so my sister wouldn't feel overshadowed. When Lucy was born, my mother told me not to expect help. I was strong. I could manage. My sister needed more support. She always did. The cello was just the clearest version of the same math. Something valuable existed. Someone louder wanted something else. Authority chose the path that avoided conflict with the person most likely to cause it. That was never me. I had built my life around being agreeable. It kept the peace. It also kept me invisible. I remembered the way my grandmother watched these exchanges. She rarely interrupted. She asked questions later. She noticed details others ignored. When Lucy practiced, my grandmother corrected her gently, then looked at me, not accusing, observant, as if she were taking notes for a future I wasn't ready to imagine. After the pool party invitation arrived, I noticed how casual it was. No apology, no explanation, just logistics. Bring aside, our SVP. My presence was assumed, not considered. They believed I would show up and help normalize what they had done. That had always been my role. Attendance equals approval. Lucy read the message over my shoulder. She didn't ask why they used her cello money. She asked what she should wear. That question broke something open in me. It wasn't confusion. It was adaptation. She was already learning how to survive without being seen. I started replaying old conversations with new ears. How often had be understanding really meant be quiet? How often had family helps family meant you help us? Patterns only feel invisible when you benefit from them. Once you stand on the other side, they are impossible to miss. By the time I drove to see my grandmother, I no longer felt shocked. I felt clear. This wasn't betrayal by strangers. It was consistency. And consistency can hurt more because it pretends to be normal. My family didn't suddenly choose my sister over my daughter. They had been choosing that way for years. The cello just made the math audible. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger requires hope. What I felt was a steady distance forming, like land pulling away from shore. I could still see everyone clearly. I just wasn't standing with them. For the first time, I wasn't asking how to fix it. I was watching, listening, letting silence show me who expected me to carry what they refused to hold themselves. That awareness settled quietly, but it changed the way I breathed, the way I listened, and the way I began preparing for a future that no longer included their approval alone. Asterisk. The boundary was crossed on a Tuesday morning, quietly, the way most damage happens. My mother called to ask if Lucy could practice later that week. Her voice was light. I said yes, then paused, then asked where the cello was. There was a short silence. Not confusion. Calculation. My father took the phone. He said they had handled it. He said the money was already allocated. He said it was done for the children. I asked which children. He didn't answer. I drove to the house anyway. The music room smelled wrong. Fresh paint. The humidifier was gone. The stand was empty. No case, no instrument. Just a corner that looked erased. Lucy stood beside me, holding her bow like it might anchor her. She didn't cry. She waited. Waiting had become familiar. In the kitchen, my parents spoke carefully. They explained the pool again. They said it increased property value. They said Lucy would benefit too. I asked how. My sister laughed from the doorway and said Lucy could swim. That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. I realized I had been negotiating my daughter's worth in rooms where it was already decided. I stopped asking questions. I stopped explaining. I took Lucy's hand and left. In the car, she asked if she had done something wrong. I told her no. I believed it for the first time, without needing them to agree. That night, I didn't call to argue. I didn't write a long message. I didn't ask for fairness. I called my grandmother. I told her everything, simply, without cushioning. She listened. She asked for dates. She asked for photos. She asked if the pool construction started after she moved. Her questions were precise. There was no comfort in them, only direction. After we hung up, something shifted in me. I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I wasn't managing their reactions. I was protecting a boundary I should have drawn years earlier. The relief surprised me. So did the quiet? Lucy practiced on a borrowed cello that week. She worked harder than she should have needed to. I watched her shoulders tense, then settle. I saw how easily children accept loss when adults normalize it. That scared me more than anger ever could. When my mother texted telling me not to involve my grandmother, I didn't reply. Silence felt cleaner. When my sister posted photos of the pool, I muted the thread. Distance became a decision, not a consequence. I didn't know what would happen next. I only knew what wouldn't. I would not stand in rooms where my daughter learned she was optional. I would not translate harm into politeness. I would not beg for belonging from people who required my silence as payment. The boundary wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It settled into place like a closed door. On one side was a family story I had carried alone. On the other was my daughter, practicing anyway, trusting me to mean what I finally understood. That trust was heavier than fear, and for the first time, I was willing to carry it. It demanded consistency. It demanded patience. It demanded that I stop explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding. I felt steadier each day, less reactive, more present. The future didn't feel safe yet, but it felt honest. And honesty, I learned, was a stronger foundation than approval. I chose to hold that line, even when it felt lonely, because Lucy was watching how I stayed. And I intended to stay, quietly, without apology, for us. I withdrew without announcements. I stopped attending gatherings and stopped answering questions framed as concern. I let my grandmother work. She never raised her voice. She filed reports, made calls, and documented timelines. The cello was recovered through quiet legal channels. The buyer wanted his money returned. My parents wanted time. Time had never been extended to Lucy. The notice arrived by certified mail. 60 days. No drama. No speeches. My mother cried to relatives. My father blamed misunderstandings. My sister posted vague messages about loyalty. None of them named the cello. They didn't have to. Everyone knew. Silence changed sides. At the pool revealed barbecue, my grandmother arrived with her lawyer. She didn't scold. She stated facts. The cello had been held in trust. Lucy was the beneficiary. The sale was invalid. Funds used for the pool were misappropriated. Consequences followed the statements like shadows. People listened because there was nothing to argue with. I stood beside Lucy and said nothing. My parents asked to speak privately. My grandmother declined. Privacy had already done enough damage. When my sister accused me of overreacting, my grandmother corrected her. Calmly, publicly. The truth sounded ordinary once spoken. Afterward, things unraveled on their own. Repayment schedules replaced vacation plans. The pool became a liability instead of a symbol. Friends stopped inviting. Conversations cooled. No one was punished. Systems simply worked as designed when documentation meets daylight. Lucy received her cello in a plain case. She opened it slowly. She didn't smile right away. She tuned. She played one scale, then another. The sound filled the room without effort. She looked at me, surprised, like something lost had remembered her. We moved into the house quietly. No celebration, just keys and boxes and space. My grandmother returned later, by choice, not necessity. Evenings became predictable. Practice, dinner, silence that felt earned. My parents called a few times. I kept the conversations brief. I didn't explain. There was nothing left to translate. Distance held better than words ever had. Lucy began speaking up at school. Small corrections, clear requests. Her teachers noticed. I noticed too. Confidence doesn't arrive all at once. It grows where it's protected. I don't know if my family learned anything. I know I did. I learned that fairness doesn't need volume. It needs records. It needs witnesses who don't flinch. Most of all, it needs someone willing to stop smoothing the edges. We kept going. Music returned to the house. The future felt quieter, not smaller. And when Lucy practiced, I listened from the doorway, not to guard her, but to remember the sound of something right being restored. I stayed quiet online and offline, letting rumors exhaust themselves. When invitations stopped, relief replaced dread. I cooked dinners that didn't rush. I learned my daughter's tempos and moods. We planned ordinary weeks. My grandmother taught Lucy how to care for the instrument, how to notice humidity and patience. I watched trust rebuild through repetition. There was grief, but it moved. No one apologized properly. I didn't wait for it. Accountability arrived without reconciliation, and that was enough. The world felt smaller in contacts and larger in honesty. I carried fewer explanations. Lucy carried her case with ease. The house held music again. We moved forward without announcing victory, just living inside the quiet proof that boundaries work when kept. I will keep choosing steadiness, telling the truth when needed, and stepping back when silence protects us better than noise, because my child learned she matters. And I learned that peace can be practical and endures beyond borrowed approval. Asterisk.